I was chatting about Battlefield 5 with a good friend of mine the other day. We had just been playing and his game had crashed following performance issues already in-game and a completely lopsided balance where poor netcode and bad game mechanics probably killed him more times than any straight up mistake or enemy outplaying him on the battlefield. He said to me, why should I waste my time with this game anymore? It's buggy, unfinished, full of design and balance problems, and even when it does work, it only just barely becomes enjoyable. Frankly, I didn't and I still don't have an answer to that question. I think this sentiment is echoing across the Battlefield community as a whole at this moment. And while most games are seeing a boost in engagement and activity as people have more time to play them as a consequence of the current public health crisis, Battlefield seems to be suffering its largest slump yet. I've talked to a number of other content creators and there seems to be close to unanimous agreement that things haven't been this bad in terms of interest in the game for a long time, possibly even ever, with Battlefield 5 at least. So strap yourself in for this one, it's going to be a little bit more of a bumpy ride. The problems the game is facing are of course long documented and frankly can only be mentioned in passing if this video isn't to be 30 minutes long. Lack of a team balancer and anti-cheat, poor performance and stability, non-existent vehicle balance with especially the planes being extremely detrimental to enjoyment for anyone on the ground on more linear game modes. Fundamental systems are executed poorly or lack the necessary depth or content to meet expectations. Be that the assignment system, which often requires players to complete the most boneheaded tasks and doesn't let you switch out assignments in game, or the weapon, soldier and vehicle cosmetics that frankly underdeliver in quantity and frequently also in quality, unless of course you're straight out balling and can spend large sums of money on the game. A specific example of what I'm talking about as regards weapon cosmetics is the default skins available for weapons, while at launch we had the mint, gold-plated, blued, night owl and chrome skins amongst others available for all weapons with the purchase of company coin. New weapons are now launching only really with mint and gold-plated skins alongside of course the usual and default urban blue and predator available on of course all weapons. Many of the maps are straight up unenjoyable, often with too little cover and cause whole groups of players to leave as soon as they come up. Not to mention that very often those very maps are poorly balanced around the respective game modes or vehicle selections possible. An example of course is Armada, but there are many more that to a lesser extent are very unpopular. Speaking of game modes, half of them, many actually popular with smaller subsets of the community, are only ever available for a week or two each chapter. Frontlines and Domination may have been advertised as part of the product at launch, but are hardly ever playable and don't get updates enabling them on some of the newer maps. Rush, a staple of the Battlefield franchise, Outpost, a relatively pleasant new addition, and Grind, something that is divisive though popular with large parts of the community, are frankly just as rarely available of course as well. Then there's the constant back and forth with the time to kill, complete ignorance of the community and their wishes, and a ridiculously bad weapon balance as a result. Sure, things are better now, though far from perfect, and DICE went from building momentum on Battlefield 5 in Chapter 5 to nearly killing the game over a decision that a number of the devs didn't even support themselves. That has pretty much been the whole story of Battlefield 5 since launch as it stands. The community would like one thing, and DICE decides to do another. Speaking of the devs though, of course, some of the most experienced and senior members of the Battlefield team have left over the past months and years, and it very much seems to be the result of management making decisions against the advice of those best in place to determine what the game actually needs. Then of course, there are the countless bugs and atrocious netcode which currently causes countless instances of people dying flat out behind corners. Netcode was always a problem with Battlefield 5, but instead of getting better, gradually things seem to be getting worse. Countless projects have been scrapped or completely half-assed, resulting in unbelievable amounts of developer time simply being wasted on features and content that never actually made it to the game. The 5v5 competitive mode and almost all of the associated weapons, soldier cosmetics, ranking systems, unique gadgets, class specializations and whatever else was produced for it, completely wasted. The co-op mode, planned to be complex with varying mission parameters and random factors ensuring a completely different experience each time, ended up so simplistic and boring it's really hardly if ever played. A waste of time. Time to kill changes, a waste of time and resources. The medal and ribbon system worked somewhat well for a few months before crippling bugs supposedly rendered it unusable, and now it's been left for dead like many other aspects of the game. But more heartbreaking are the projects that showed actual promise or are vital to Battlefield 5's success as a Battlefield game. Community games, or RSP as most people call it, was dead on arrival because you couldn't complete Tides of War missions, and any basic functionality needed to host and maintain a proper community was missing. You may now be able to get Tides of War XP after months of DICE refusing to heed the advice of its community and enable it, but with the remainder of the needed basic features still missing, RSP is likely to remain a fringe feature only really ever useful for hosting a quick temp game with your friends or of course a clan. Firestorm, a BR with actual promise, good foundations, and that was actually fun, at least in squads, taken from its original developer Criterion and given to DICE upon completion, just to be left for dead on the side as players fed up waiting for much needed fundamental improvements stopped playing the mode altogether. That of course alongside the boneheaded decision to launch the mode behind a full $60 paywall instead of free to play like so many other of the BR game modes. Need proof of how successful that can be? Just look to Call of Duty's Warzone and how strongly that is performing at the moment. The current slump for Battlefield 5 isn't just to be blamed on all the mistakes made by DICE in the past, however. DICE, even now, is worsening the situation with some of their decisions. In the face of steep competition from COD this year, which has a polished and fun game to offer, a game that is receiving constant content drops and continues to go from strong to stronger, DICE is seemingly slowing down the already sluggish pace of new content for the game even further. Chapter 6 is 3 months long, and as far as we know from DICE, the only content we are to get for this time period is what launched on day 1 of Chapter 6. 1 map, 3 new weapons, 2 of which were delayed from Chapter 4, 2 new gadgets, 1 of which was delayed from Chapter 5, and some tank and soldier customization options. I understand that the current health crisis has caused disruption at the studio as operations have moved to a work from home model. But if the next update was scheduled for early April, which is essentially now, and you've only been working from home for the past 2 or so weeks, the impression I get is you guys were never going to be ready to release in early April anyway, and likely never intended to launch additional meaningful content with that patch either. I could be wrong, of course, and I'm fully aware that I'm looking at this all from an outside perspective, judging a company for which I've never worked for and employees I personally don't know. But from where I'm standing, it looks like DICE frankly doesn't have the resources or manpower to bring the quantity and quality of content expected from a AAA shooter and needed in order to properly compete with what's out there on the market in 2020. They don't have the leadership required to direct the precious resources they do have to work on those things most important for the game: bugs, netcode, quality of life and gameplay improvements alongside new content. All of that with an ear to what the community does and doesn't like and does or doesn't think Battlefield 5 still needs. If you would have followed that path, Battlefield 5 would never have been in the situation it currently finds itself in. Okay, so things are pretty bleak. Where do we go from here? Well, if you think Battlefield 5 is to see a Star Wars Battlefront 2 or Battlefield 4 comeback, I frankly think you are a little too optimistic. DICE seemingly doesn't have whatever they need to truly turn this into a great game, and they continue to make mistakes. The question is, how much damage control can they really do? How much decent content can they bring out, and how much trust can they regain with their existing community? For the average non-Battlefield fan, Battlefield 5 is done. That's my personal opinion. For those who are, and have been for quite some time, faithful to the franchise and faithful to the game, things can at least definitely still get better. DICE needs to deliver a strong Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 with content people want to see, with changes and improvements that people have been asking for since launch, and without game-breaking bugs. No more rockets that one-bang everything. Clearly OP guns, massive performance bugs or revive issues. Definitely no 3-month waiting periods for fixes to those issues, as currently DICE seems to absolutely be fine with. We do have hot fixes for a reason, employ them more frequently. Also, start operating on a proper schedule again that is outwardly visible to the community. Why are we no longer getting announcements about content until the day or week before it launches? How is anyone supposed to have faith that this game will continue to be supported when there is zilch official information on what is to come next? Following the Chapter 4 disaster, where hardly any of the content was delivered on time or at all, we've gotten very little from DICE in terms of roadmaps and announcements or even solid communication. The problem with Chapter 4, however, was not that you announced content that was coming, it was that you didn't deliver on it. Fix that and continue to properly communicate with your community, please. Look, I love the Battlefield franchise. I've spent thousands of hours playing various of the games and probably even longer making videos about it. Guides, weapon reviews, news vids, etc. That doesn't happen without a certain amount of passion and love for the games. But I find myself agreeing with many out there in the community, asking myself, why am I still bothering with Battlefield 5? That is the question, and frankly, in many cases, not only are we asking that question here too frequently, but also, very often, there isn't really an answer to it. But that is enough salt for today. Feel free, of course, to sound off down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, rating would be much appreciated. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.